Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my Sonic Ring Bond writing stream. My name's Josh Tarwater, and I'm the creator of the Sonic Ring Bond AU. Wow, it's been a while since I've done this. Been a very long while, actually. Mind me as I just make one more comment over there at the chat, letting everyone know that I'm on mic. Hopefully you can hear me well enough over the music. It's been so long, and the app's updated a few times. I don't know if the music volume's right. Since I do have music playing at the moment, though it won't be a consistent thing. The music that you're listening to is the Sonic Ring Bond main theme, done by Shimsun the Gadite over on Twitter. Very great musician. I recommend everybody track him down. If you check out at Sonic Ring Bond on Twitter, and just go ahead and check the media tab. You can find the theme there, as well as a link to the artist. Acts that everybody does. He's a great musician. So you're going to notice lots of differences this year if you've been with me on my streams last year. I'll probably still be having the same writing style. No guarantee that it will necessarily be as smooth as I would like. Again, I haven't sat down and written for a few months, so this first stream's probably going to be a little rough. But big thing you're going to notice is everything's going to be staying very much on a single set of imagery. I haven't started up the Discord yet that I had wanted to, which is kind of a shame, but hopefully I can get that up and running again later on. What else? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Probably am. Wouldn't be new for me, but just lots of little things. Everyone may remember me premiering this animation at the end of my last story. If you're following me actually from that story, things to know about the AU as I go forward. Today's story is kind of a reset for the AU, but if you followed what was going on, you'll probably have more of an idea of what's going on for the situation as we start, even though it's going to be a bit different. So let me go ahead and let this close out, and there we go. Hope I have the main screen up and running. And you should notice a couple of things here as I get going. Like right now, I'm still on my actual streaming control window. So I haven't actually switched over, but once I do, you should notice the cogwheel there start to turn into logo, because I have it set up as a GIF. You'll also notice I got notes set up off to the side. The idea behind those is it's a place for me to keep music, so that way it's not in the middle of the text. I know some people like that idea. I just personally found it kind of distracting, and I feel it's kind of not really clean for the writing. And so it's going to be a notes off to the side like that, and so it's something that you'll only see if you're here on stream. And good morning, welcome to the stream, Mar. I hope I said that right. Thank you. Hoping to have a bit of fun writing tonight. I'm probably going to talk about a lot of the stuff. It's morning my time. Technically, 2 o'clock in the morning local time, actually. The stream started at 9 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time, so... And that's what I base all of my scheduling off of. As I said though, a lot of this when I take a break later, when I get back, I'm going to talk about it some more as I go through the proofing. And it's just being the start of the stream. Really wanted to let everybody know what's going on. And again, this type of opening to the streams, you'll only see if you join me live. I will be trying to start actually recording the stream starting from after the break. But for now, let me go ahead and start playing around with the actual writing part. And now that I actually have my window active, I should be able to see things like the little pause button there if I highlight it. And if I come over sideways, again, you'll see the notes. One of the sets of notes that you'll see me keeping track of, though you probably won't see too many of them show up while I'm writing, is going to be the stuff that says GDN. And what GDN means is going to be game document notes. And the idea behind that is, as always, Sonic Ringbond to me is not just my Sonic the Hedgehog AU, where I explore Amy in a very different light, as well as give the rings more purpose than just a gameplay mechanic, and really make them a thing that the characters are going to interact with, as it's just a natural part of the world. I mean, for example, if you followed the games, then you're well aware that rings are everywhere all the time. But the only places you really see rings see any type of major use is usually only one at a time, and not filling the environment. And that's usually going to be in the Archie comics. I believe you might have saw rings occasionally in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. I can't speak for Underground because I never watched it. And Sonic X, once in a blue moon, they showed up and pretty much got a similar use as the Saturday morning cartoon and Archie comics. But to me, that never matches the games. And so that's one of the things that the AU is exploring. And so again, this is my all-around opening for everything. Future scenes will not have text before the title. Unless, of course, I'm going to be doing a big, impressive, like, end of a major story arc scene, at which case I may do it. But for the most part, I'll have little notes here and there all throughout saying things related to a game document, because again, to me, the AU is more than just being explanations to ways that I see Amy and explore the rings and their relationship with the world, but it's also something I want to structure the story this year, so that way a game could be right into it. If you're curious about the type of game idea I have, eventually I'll have a Discord up and running for the AU, which will more accurately describe what's going on with the game design notes. But the idea would pretty much be a browser-style game where you have an overworld map, like say from Sonic the Chronicles, and then action stages, which would be more traditional Sonic platforming. All I'll have now will just be notes and a collection of them, because frankly, I'm no game designer or level designer or anything like that, and I'll just be focusing here on writing the AU itself. Hoping I can keep this going for several years, grow an audience, and get more people involved who are as passionate about it as I am. But for now, we're going to be starting with episode of Afterfall 1. And I will explain what Afterfall means in this sort after the break. So for now, really late start heading into 10 minutes into the stream. So let's go ahead and get to the last bit for writing. You'll notice I have more fun stuff down here, including the zone, both the start and the end, though I do need to change this to being a pair of question marks. No guarantee that these are going to be as clean as prior to where the entire scene was considered an act. In this case, acts will change based on the needs of the story, though I'll try to keep them as contained as possible within the scene that I'm working on. I do need to check one more thing, because my page format is a little different. Alright, you should see it down here at the bottom of the screen, that there's 2,300 characters already. Just need to keep track of the character count, because I will be posting to Tapas, though it will publish always a month after the stream airs. Well, that'll change a bit later in the year, but I'll cover that when I get to it. But for now, just know that if you want to follow the story and not watch the streams to do so, that Tapas is going to be the place that I'll have it up. As always, just look for the turning gear ring here. But for now, it's time to go ahead and get started. It looks like Word has had quite a few updates since I last used it. And there's just one of those things you'll see me do a lot of on-the-fly reformatting as I work. Now I know what's bothering me. I hadn't even noticed. My line spacing is off. There we go. I prefer a 2-point when I'm writing normally. Just makes it easier to read in my opinion. Won't try to do too much corrections while I'm writing, so that way I can save time and have stuff to talk about during the proofing. Though I will try to correct certain things as I see them. Good morning, Silent Author. Thank you very much for joining my stream. I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to ask me any questions. This is obviously a Sonic the Hedgehog AU. I'm actually writing the opening scene to where I set the overall main plot. So, hopefully it helps give a decent idea. It'll look a little different from most Sonic the Hedgehog AUs. On one hand, it's rooted deeply into the games, but also completely kind of turns them on their heads as I, of course, play around with my preferences. It's mostly based around the idea of exploring the rings, and kind of my own perceptions on the character of Amy Rose, and how I'd rather see her used personally than the direction she went in. I mean, either way, she's my favorite character next to Sonic himself. I just have, again, biases and preferences. A lot of people find that Amy's never done anything, and I can understand that, but I don't weigh character worth in what they've done to the story, more so in whether or not they entertained me and how other characters reacted to them. To me, it's kind of weird to put value in a character based off of their contribution rather than their entertainment value, because at the end of the day, regardless of quality of a story, and even style and how it's told, stories are meant to entertain or teach. The Sonic the Hedgehog IP is an entertainment property. As such, I base my value on if it entertains me or not. And Amy very much entertains me. At least when she's handled in ways that I personally prefer. But she has accomplished a lot even at the games. It's just her accomplishments are more indirectly perceived. Oh, I don't disagree with that. Comic relief and love interest are two of the roles that she plays. But I've always believed there's a lot more that can be done with her, and as such, it's why I've taken to AU writing and so on. Now, how I perceive her is definitely different from most, but it'll be a while before Amy shows up in my story. Right now, I'm going through the prologue chapters of my story, and so it's going to be a while before she's a regular character and I start to explore her and pretty much use her as the main character of my AU. Though she will be, for this story, accompanied by Sonic himself as the main character, and an OC of mine who I will be introducing significantly later. Having never watched Naruto, I can't really speak towards Sakura's character, but I've seen more than enough people break down her character to find her nothing at all like Amy. They have similar roles, I'll agree to that. Though I'll also argue that Sakura is used in serious situations significantly more so than Amy is. that makes sense for the context of Naruto. Whereas Amy as a character, if you're familiar with her original nickname of Rosie the Rascal, she's a wild card brought in, and the idea to a comic relief is to keep the idea of fun as part of the property. But if a story isn't serious to begin with, a comic relief character kind of becomes an unnecessary and wasted character. And so one of the things that has to be worked with Amy to bring more contribution than just being the girl hanging off of Sonic's arm is you have to use part of her character foundation, which is a Genki girl. And Genki girls have a particular set of story beats that they follow that allows for serious use occasionally, but it takes advantage of the comic relief status in a way that is constantly interacting with other characters. And so that's where I'll be starting, is showing that more Genki girl over-enthusiastic side of Amy. It's something that's, for the most part, been lost due to being unpopular, which to me is a shame, because it's one of the things that I've always loved about Amy, is that childish, rascally, teasing, over-enthusiastic nature of hers. She's meant to be a character who overwhelms others, because that's where a lot of the comedy in her case comes from, is both the trouble she causes from being over-enthusiastic and the trouble she gets into from being over-enthusiastic. But it's also supposed to lead to, in a adventure series like Sonic, further adventure or shape adventures in different ways because she got involved. And yes, I agree, for the most part, Amy is very much not allowed to be Amy. If you're an Amy Rose fan and would like to see Amy, you pretty much have to replace her now with Tangle the Lemur from the IDW comics, who, outside of Amy's romantic aspects, is otherwise Amy in every way, but a bit more serious and a bit more introspective. As an Amy fan, though, I find it's honestly very hard to appreciate Tangle, because more often than not, I look at Tangle and I just ask myself, why can't Amy be that still? Why can't Amy be that still? Why can't Amy be that still? And that's a bit of a disservice to Tangle as a consumer of Sonic media. But my perceptions on Amy are still also very different from most people. I was recently very much a target of Twitter criticism after posting a 250 tweet long essay. The funny thing is that the very society that attacks Amy for being Amy is also supposed to support Amy for being Amy. So, it's a bit of everyday hypocrisy. And one of the core messages of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has always been be yourself, which is something which Amy used to physically embody, being both an extreme girly girl, but also a doesn't care about how it looks tomboy. And so the fact that she took those two opposite extremes and meshed them into a single character, it kind of became a major all-around problem for her when they started saying she can't be girly girl, but she can still be tomboy, and Amy started to lose a lot of what she was. You can still find it on the Japanese side, which is where I go a lot of the times to study characterization and so on. I've always had a preference for the Japanese characterizations. You'll see I feel that way a lot about Shadow as well. Sonic himself, my favorite version of the character is from the Japanese version of the OVA, which is really true for most of the characters. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Eggman, their OVA iterations are easily my favorites. Shadow and Amy, both Sonic Adventure 2. Though 06 is a very good argument for Shadow for me as well. Most things outside of Shiromai Kawa writing Shadow, though, I don't normally enjoy. I would be surprised if one can say Rouge even has a character anymore. She used to be the femme fatale spy, whose allegiances you could never be sure of except the Shadow. These days, she's nothing more but a Master Emerald joke with Knuckles, and that's a major disservice to her character. But little surprised that you can't even use her with Shadow as a support character to him to show her more depthful, caring, and personal side, because Shadow has to be the edgy Vegeta knockoff. And that's really a shame. And yes, Meta from the 80s, I agree, Tangle has, I don't even want to say slowly lost her role as the introduction character. Her role as the introduction character is not even in the IDW comics anymore. At this point, you just have to know the comics. Now, Rouge, she's a character that if I get to her in my AU, it's going to be sometime down the road. And I'll definitely need to sit down and study her and get some experts on her character. She's never really been a standout character for me, but I've definitely always preferred seeing her more introspective and personal side versus her playful side. And so having both of those in use would be pretty nice. One of the biggest reasons you don't really hear about Cosmo anymore is simply because Cosmo was exclusive to Sonic X, and Sonic X's airtime period was between Heroes and 06. More so the release of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and 06. And it's been almost 17 years since that time period, and without an in-game presence, with the games being the main product of the IP, it's a little surprised that she's just not heard about anymore. I mean, you kind of have to consider, 15 years later, Sonic's target audience has always been 8 to 11-year-old boys. Though it attracts a lot of older fans, and it also attracts a lot of female fans and non-binary fans. One of the things about it is that because of that target demographic, one has to consider that the last decade of Sonic has been from Sonic Colors on. And pretty much, aside from the rather unusual aesthetic tone of Forces, it's been primarily a stand-up comic routine starring Sonic as a stand-up comic rather than a globe-trotting adventurer. His typical onstage partner, Tails, and the guy on the other side of the audience, also partaking in the act, Eggman. And so there's a lot of characters who have fallen behind. And not so much fallen behind, but that shift to a almost stand-up comic take on an adventure has really taken away the deeper character interactions and meanings. And that's one of the things which makes the IDW comics really pop for a lot of people, is because you see game characters in a game setting interacting with each other. And regardless of your thoughts on Ian Flynn or his writing quality, that is so much more than what the games have offered for the last decade. And it's the only thing offering them, that it has created this attachment and perception of quality which is perhaps significantly greater than it is, since the IDW comics are every bit as static as the games have been since the Takashi Iizuka as head of Sonic Team Age era launched. And that's kind of a shame, but it's also part of the reason why the movie is so successful, because while it's not a game's characters in a game setting like the IDW comics, it is a setting which allows for growth and development. And so you kind of have this weird overlap right now of the fandom of the games are what have been being pushed by Takashi Iizuka, at least from a marketing perspective. Can't really say what his actual perception is. And I see plenty of mention of Blaze, though to be fair, most mention I see of Blaze is from the shipping side of the community. Cream, I'll agree, has mostly dropped off the map. Jet, his fans still speak up enough. And Chaos and Doomseye, I'm not really too surprised because, in the grand scheme of Sonic storytelling, they were one-off characters meant for one story and then to move on. While there's a lot of lore that's attached to them, if the lore isn't carried forward, which Doomseye's lore was not carried out of Shadow's own game, and Chaos's lore stopped as soon as you finish the adventure games. So it's not really a surprise. But really, my personal perception is that Sonic, due to the fact that he's a character with a static arc, having long-running characters who can develop and grow, following Sonic is a horrible way to engage with those characters. For the most part, most of them need their own spin-offs to exploit their popularity and to allow continued growth without forcing them into dull and static presentations. Sonic has well over 100 characters if you count all the media. But again, it's not particularly surprising due to the nature of the Sonic storytelling structure. The biggest problem is it's kind of a... But it's... yeah, I agree, it's a lot of characters. But the problem with the Sonic storytelling method, and I will personally be following it with my AU, is that as a story, Sonic on a whole is a road trip story. And Sonic as a character with a static arc, he arrives in a location, becomes a part of the story of the location and or the characters in the location. As their story is resolved and their growth arc is completed for the segment that Sonic is involved, Sonic then moves on and we see the next adventure. And road trip stories do this all the time. Probably the most well-known road trip story for quality is probably, from what I've seen, Kino's Journey. The problem with a road trip story, though, is you expect characters that you interacted with in the past to encounter you again in the future. But where Sonic has a problem is Sonic isn't written by a creative telling a story, so much as Sonic has creatives telling stories so that way Sega can market their flagship IP. And so what happens is marketability becomes the driving force of everything. And so a lot of these characters get brought along when narratively they have no function, and the narrative has nothing for them to do. It's one of the reasons why, if you follow the IDW comics, Knuckles has been pretty much 100% absent, except for the occasional appearance, since the end of the Metal Sonic fight on Angel Island. Because his character role and his character story legitimately has nothing to do with Sonic's adventures, unless his adventures take him to an adventure Knuckles is on, or to Angel Island. And as such, Knuckles is a character who suffers from his own popularity, because he's not actually narratively and structurally designed as a character to be used all the time. But he was pretty much as popular, if not more so, than Sonic from literally his first Game Magazine appearance. And as such, Sega saw they can make money off of him, and he's been literally everywhere since, with only Sonic Adventure giving him anything to do that was actually relevant to his character and allowing further growth. Sonic Adventure 2 could have, and I'll touch on it in my AU, giving Knuckles a lot more purpose involving Sonic Adventure 2, but it's going to be a while before Knuckles shows up in my AU as well. A lot of characters that people are familiar with, Shadow, Knuckles, Blaze, Silver, they're kind of locked to being at the end of the arc I'll be starting with, because a lot of what will be going on with their characters is tied in heavily with my major plot, more so than the character building and world building mini arcs I'll be doing leading up to that bigger story. But again, that road trip structure, which I will be following, and I would greet J7N, but they look to be a bit of a bot. So, if you're not a bot, J7N, please feel free to say something more than advertising your shop. But otherwise, that road structure story results in having lots and lots and lots of characters, but it simultaneously creates characters to literally be thrown away. And so the better written a thrown away character is, in a product that relies on high marketability, you pull them back a lot, even if there's nothing to do, because literally just putting them there allows for people to buy the product. And to me, that's a disservice to the characters. But I'm a storyteller who's invested in characters before story, world setting, and especially in video games, the gameplay. And so, it makes it very difficult. Probably the best example of a road trip story collecting characters and routinely using them over the course of the story Haven't watched it myself, so I can't say how well it does it, but from the reactions of fans that I've seen, that would have to be One Piece. And I don't know if a lot of people even realize that One Piece is a road trip story, but it is technically a road trip story, and each arc has its own distinct cast of characters, and when the arc is over, most of them are pushed off to the side, unless there's something that they can bring in other arcs. And, that's if they just survive the arc, because, One Piece, to my knowledge, has plenty of character deaths. But it is an example of having a large cast in an ongoing road trip story. But I think part of what helps One Piece, and why it's able to get away with it, is because things move very slowly. And because you can only move as fast as a pirate ship can sail, this allows you to keep the world smaller. And a smaller world can naturally be more dense. Sonic, however, as a character who can literally run at the speed of sound and faster, the only time his speed has ever been listed was at Mach 1.2, which is the standard that you'll see me go for with my AU. The idea of him being able to reach the speed of light has never sat well with me and kind of defeats the idea of the thematic naming for the character. Even though Sonic Trivia will tell you that the original planned name for him was something along the lines of Lightspeed, which would have been a Japanese way of shortening the words light and speed into a single word, Lightspeed. And so it was a concept for his character from the get-go. And little surprise, since the entire gameplay side of ideas that led to part of Sonic's creation was literally speedrunning World 1-1 from Super Mario Bros. It's not particularly surprising that the naming would have been based off that type of speed. But because it was believed that Americans wouldn't comprehend the name, very true, since it's very Japanese, the way that name would have been derived, the name Sonic was chosen instead. And Sonic is a very simple name for Americans to know, because you're going to associate Sonic with sound, specifically the speed of sound, and the event that occurs when you break the sound barrier, a sonic boom. That is something that's very easy for Americans to latch on to. And as a result, Sonic going anything beyond sound-based speeds to me is a waste of his character thematics. But because he can run at the speed of sound, to give you an idea of how fast that is, the United States of America from Los Angeles to New York City is somewhere around 3,000 miles. At around the speed of Mach 1.2 would mean that Sonic is running in excess of 900 miles an hour. At 900 miles an hour, one can go from Los Angeles to New York in a straight line in a little over 3 hours and 20 minutes. Now, I'll be taking the road trip from where I live to New York City in a couple of months, and it's going to take about 3.5 days to get there. The funny thing is, the only official statements of Sonic moving at the speed of light is the description on the Lightspeed Dash, and from Takashi Iizuka pretty much just saying that his speed is like the Flash, which is to say it's whatever they need it to be at any given point, which is really lazy storytelling in my opinion, and creates various inconsistencies. Exactly. And to a degree, I don't mind supersonic speed, though I will be heavily nerfing supersonic for my AU, is because supersonic is already a broken thing as it is, that when typically used in a story is designed to instantly end an event. Which is probably why my favorite supersonic story in the entire series is kind of a toss-up between Sonic 3 and Knuckles with Doomsday Zone, and fighting Perfect Dark Gaia at the end of Sonic Unleashed. Is the reason Doomsday Zone is because literally it's peak Eggman. Eggman is so overwhelmingly above what Sonic can do that he has to use Super Mode to finally stop Eggman at the end. And to me, that is a brilliant way to show how great of a villain Eggman is. Now with Perfect Dark Gaia, Supersonic is squaring off against a literal god, and as such, as gods are above the Chaos Emeralds in most instances, Sonic being worn down and having to fight alongside another god, so that way he can actually help put an end to the situation. To me, that's a very good way to use them. In contrast, though, in the IDW comics, when he takes on Zavik at the end of the Metal Virus arc, defeating Zavik in a frame makes perfect sense, because for as much as Zavik is presented as this great warrior and this and that, an invincible entity that flies around and destroys things literally upon touching them if he wants to, you're not really going to stand much of a chance against. Is it necessarily a satisfying conclusion to everything that was being built up? Not really. But when you write the situation to where the only conclusion is to use the Chaos Emeralds, naturally the ending is going to be disappointing. And hopefully I can avoid that with my AU. Which I'm currently very, very far behind my writing. Normally I would have actually finished the scene by now, instead of doing all this talking. So I'm going to go ahead and double down on it. It's not meant to be a long scene today, but I still need to go ahead and double down on it, just so that way I get things growing. And thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk and chat. Always one of the fun things about my streams is getting that opportunity. If you get a chance to see more of my stuff in the future, I hope my story entertains you, and that I can manage to avoid most of the writing traps that generally plague the Sonic franchise. We'll see though. I'm still a fan of the franchise, so mistakes are bound to happen. You have yourself a great day. Thank you. I just realized I had not been listening to what I was planning to listen to while writing all this. Well, that's perfectly fine. I'll just have to update the notes for it later. No thoughts on Sonic Prime Amy yet, because there is literally no Sonic Prime Amy to have thoughts on. We have literally a concept drawing, well, a piece of concept art showing a caveman-inspired Amy. There is literally nothing there for me to base an opinion off of. At most, from what I'm seeing, I don't particularly care for what I'm seeing. As I was talking about earlier, one of the problems with Sonic's stories is the size of his stories. Because he's so fast, his stories have to be small and self-contained, so when he shows up somewhere else, you don't think about a dense world, because a dense world for Sonic starts to look abandoned, but a detached world starts to feel disconnected. But the more you connect things, the smaller Sonic's world starts to feel. It's one of the reasons I have ring shifts as part of my story, and a layered multi-dimensional world, is it keeps Sonic's world expansive, large, and allows him to continuously adventure, and justify why he doesn't encounter other characters on a regular basis. The approach Sonic Prime is taking is a multiversal approach based on the old idea of reflections based off alternate versions of the world based off a snapshot of the present. And I've never been fond of that structure myself, and so Sonic Prime is going to have to work really hard to show me that there's reason for me to care about that. At most, I would presume it will attempt to succeed at showing different facets of the characters, but it's going to depend on how much involvement Sega has and how well the characters are known by the teams and writers working on it. And right now, Caveman Amy it doesn't give me a lot of promise, suffice to say. A lot of people are excited for it. For me, it's just not there. And there we go. Half an hour late because I was definitely talking quite a bit. And as it turns out, I was not listening to Shadow Forest, but yes, it'll be neat stuff off the Chrono Cross original soundtrack. I ended up listening to... Let me make sure I get this accurate. Wait just a moment to find the information. Of course, my cursor bouncing all over the screen probably looks confusing, but that's fine. Let's see here. Sonic Greenbond, main theme. By... Let me just make sure I get the name right. By Shinshin Dagadite. Which resulted in actually being able to listen to music for the entire stream. That's going to be a bit of a rarity and not a common sight. And as I said, this is a relatively short scene, as it's just the introduction. Next scene should start to be a bit more interesting. But for the moment, I appreciate that. I'll actually now be going ahead to take a break. And that's going to mean that I will be back in a bit to start the proofing. And when I return, I'll also start recording. So if you have any questions that you would like to have preserved to be found elsewhere in my answers, that will definitely be the time to ask them. Thank you very much for joining me for the writing portion of the stream. And again, I'll be taking a short break to stretch, and I'll be back in a bit. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sonic Ring Bond writing stream. This will be the proofing section of the stream. To those of you who have been with me since the stream started, welcome back. I will be on chat as before. And again, this is going to be the first, and I am actually recording now. This will be a first time recording for me for my AU writing streams. And I will be posting this to YouTube as well afterwards. Hopefully, YouTube can be a little finicky. Anyways, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Twitter user SonicFanJ at Josh Tarwater. If you're familiar with me from there, please forgive me for using my natural and untrained voice. I'll leave it at that because I'll explain that at another time. But for now, welcome to Sonic Ring Bond for 2022. I will now be focusing on telling my story. A lot of changes if you've been following the AU for a while. New story, new setting. Same main villain though, and Emperor Benedict Yoloku, the God of Rings. Pardon me. And so, as I said, this is going to be the proofing session of the stream. So lots to cover, lots to consider, lots to talk about. To begin, I'd just like to cover the basic idea behind the AU, which is really, I perceive the character of Amy Rose very differently from how most Sonic fans and even Amy fans perceive her. And so the idea behind the AU was to take a redesign I created of her using her original nickname, Rosie the Rascal, to explore her in a new light. As I developed ideas for the AU, it shaped also a further use of rings, and to better tie them into the story, the world, and on a whole to make them a part of the story as more than just the occasional odd object that doesn't even function as it would in the games. And so, lots that I will be doing, lots I'll be talking about. The point to streams and or videos like this is to sit down and go through what I wrote on stream. My streams are going to be every Saturday and Sunday. Well, correction, they're not Saturday and Sunday. They are Sunday and Mondays at 9 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. For me, that is local time, 2 in the morning, because of where I live. Which will also be the case for a lot of people. When daylight savings times changes, that may affect it. I have no idea if Greenwich observes it or not. Kind of a funny thing, but I'll make sure to make corrections as necessary when I get to it. For now, though, what we'll be focusing on is talking about the ideas I have, what I was trying to accomplish with the scene, and what my intentions were. I'll be covering things that I put into notes, as aside from telling a story, I want to design the AU to also be convertible into, say, a browser game, which has overworld maps similar to Sonic Chronicles. Though I never played the game, so I mostly think of how the website had worked way back when the game had launched, and also action stages, which are more of your traditional 2D Sonic games. I won't be making it myself because I'm not a game designer, developer, or programmer, but I still want to put the notes out there in case anybody else decides it may be of interest. They will eventually be collected on a dedicated Discord server for Sonic Ring Bond. And I hope people who partake of the Discord will enjoy the AU for more than just the story. That said, you'll notice if you were here before the stream that I had, well, before this part of the stream that I now have no music playing. The music that was playing at the start of the recording is the Sonic Ringbond main theme, done by Shimshon Degata. I actually ended up listening to it the whole time I wrote the scene, which is not what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to have a very different atmosphere in mind while working the scene. But honestly, I very much enjoyed the theme. It just really encapsulates the atmosphere that I want from the AU. But as I move into telling the story itself, the theme I should have been listening to for this scene is Shadow Force by Yasunori Mitsuda off of the Chrono Cross original soundtrack. And as you'll notice over here in my notes, I have two different songs listed, both off the same note. You'll also notice I have another note which says GDN opening cutscene after new game selected. And that is game document notes for the idea of keeping track of how my story goes and how a game would be woven into it. It's kind of at this point more so just a bit of, I don't know, ego stroking, or just being prepared for something which can come in the future. As you will notice, I have a disclaimer at the top. The following is a work of fan fiction by Joshua D. Tarwater and is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by Sega Sammy Holdings. Sega Sammy Holdings retains full rights over the Sonic the Hedgehog trademark intellectual property and contaminate or take control of this work at any time. That part may seem a bit peculiar to people, and again, that's a bit of the ego stroking I was talking about, but to me, Sonic Ringbond isn't just my AU to tell, but it is a community project designed to become a place to where fans can come together and grow the Sonic the Hedgehog IP in a as close to unified as this fan base can get way through use of my story, AU, and storytelling. And for that to work, Sega has to be able to effectively claim anything within it. And as such, everything affiliated with the AU that is produced specifically for the AU, I consider legally forfeit to Sega Sammy Holdings. And yes, I have recorded that. That is legally binding. And anyone else who contributes to the AU, I will be asking to also be willing to make that legal forfeit of rights to Sega Sammy Holdings ownership. For now, though, I'm just writing and telling the story that's in my head, and not getting paid for it, because I don't expect to. That said, my opening lines here. This is what you're going to see me do a lot over the course of the story. Well, over the course of these streams, is I'll highlight an area of the text, talk about what's going on in it, and as I said, this is the proofing section of the stream, so I'll also be correcting mistakes, and not just talking about my ideas. If you do have questions about the AU, the setting, my ideas, my thoughts, this part of the stream is recorded, so go ahead and throw your questions into chat, and I will gladly read them on stream. In time, that Discord server I mentioned, I will probably set up a question and answer section in there, and we'll read those on stream at the end of the proofing. But we'll see how it goes. A lot of plans, which equals a lot of work, but I got a regular 40-hour-a-week daytime job, so some things may not go as quickly as I would like them to. But for now, let's go ahead and start with the opening before the title. And I can read it off if anyone would like, so I'll go ahead and do so. Before the new age of rings can begin, a hero must fail, and a world fall. This is a tale that comes after, one the rings will always remember, Under a Sky So Blue, a story of a girl and a boy's love for her, a story of a ring bond. Can you say, I love you? So, the whole point to this opening statement is going to be, this is the idea behind the AU. And everything here has a lot of meaning. So, before the new Age of Rings can begin, a hero must fail. And there's all sorts of additional meanings behind this. And a lot of it kind of springs out of where I store it in my subconscious, so I might not even necessarily notice it before I start writing myself. That said, the new Age of Rings that I talk about is literally a world for the Sonic the Hedgehog IP, in which case the rings are more than just a gameplay mechanic. They are a part of the world, and everyone knows it. And that would be the new Age of Rings. And so anything that's Sonic Ring Bond can be considered New Age of Rings. Or NAR, I guess, if you wanted to abbreviate it. Now, the a hero must fall part, or must fail part, is specifically more to a story-related thing, which is to say that Sonic himself fails. He does not save the day. And so it could expand beyond that if, say, that the Sega-owned IP fails, which would be honestly kind of upsetting to me. Huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan here, been with the series since 1991, so that would very much disappoint me. But story-wise, Sonic must fail. He must fail to defeat the villain, who is again going to be my main villain, Benedict Yodoku, the God of Rings. And finally, as that opening line ends, and a world fall, once again that bit of ego stroking. World fall is not just talking about the world collapsing, falling apart, being destroyed, all that type of stuff. Worldfall is literally the title that I give the idea of if Sega Sammy Holdings actually adapted this work to the game universe, and what Worldfall is, literally titled Sonic the Hedgehog Worldfall, would literally be the Sega Sammy Holdings told story of Sonic's fail and the subsequent end of the world. And everything pretty much being wiped out to allow for this story to begin. And so, a bit of ego stroking, but if you're ever curious what are the events before the new Age of Rings, just know that it's Worldfall, which is a story I will personally not be telling unless Sega pays me to, which would be a trip. It would be a wow moment for me. So, as we get past that opening line, and we move on to this is a tale that comes after, one the rings will always remember. Literally just telling you what time period it is, which is literally after a true defeat for Sonic. Which is something kind of unheard of, because literally with the way Ring Bond is, there is no going back to what's before it. It is literally structurally impossible. And then the follow-up, one the rings will always remember, that line is literally just telling everyone that the rings will remember it. One of my big things for the AU and the use of rings is the memories of the rings. The rings remember. The world is built from rings. I'll explain the structure of it and how the world works as the story progresses. Lots of content to cover there. But additionally, the rings will always remember was the catchphrase for my prior works, playing with the AU and working with it, saying playing with it's kind of dishonest and ingenuine because I was writing seriously. But at this point, the story itself is a little, I guess we can call it, weak, I suppose. Not so much weak, but I guess unfocused. I was going off so far on a tangent and into the Son Amy aspects of the franchise, which is a huge part of what I enjoy, that I literally cut everything else out. And so I want to reunify my ideas with what exists within the Sonic the Hedgehog IP. Now, Under a Sky So Blue, literally the easiest way to describe that is that everything is under the Sonic the Hedgehog umbrella. And Sonic being blue, like the sky, that's where you get it from. And when I say everything, I do mean everything. If you do not like, say, the games, but prefer the comics or the Freedom Fighters, you will find variations of the Freedom Fighter characters in my AU. They will show up eventually. No, they will not be what you know from the comics. That is not to say that when I do use them, I will not bring in character experts to help me get a good feel for the characters so I can write them as accurately as I can, even if tweaked for my AU. And so as we move on, a story of a girl and a boy's love for her. Again, the entire AU exists and was created to tell stories for my redesign of Amy Rose, Rosie the Rascal. And as she finally joins the story later, I'll talk about her a lot and the ideas behind her. But the simple thing is, if you're not familiar with her already, is when Sonic Mania came out and I heard, wow, I suddenly can't remember his name. We'll just say Hoshino song. I guess. I can't remember his full name right now. That's really bad of me. I believe it's Hirokazu Hoshino song? Saying it in that order. Well, saying it with song, it should be Hoshino Hiroyuki song, I believe. But he is credited as Amy's creator, though really she was created by committee, and he was just the lead of the committee. And so he had the final say on everything. But even Sonic co-creator Oshima Naoto-san also was involved with Amy's creation. And the idea of her being Sonic's girlfriend has been there literally since she inherited it from Madonna. It's not a traditional boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, it's not a traditional love story, and it's one of the things I want to explore with my AU. And hence a story of a girl and a boy's love for her covers that. There is more meaning in that, and that will come to light later in the AAU story. So sometime in the future. And this last part, a story of a ring bond, is a little bit more complicated because I haven't described fully what the ring bond is, which is suffice to say, Sonic or another character who can make ring bonds takes a ring and fully expends it. And in my AU, when a ring has its energy depleted, it simply becomes a part of the planet again. And any memories it has or gets called up will determine what it does when it becomes a part of the planet. Does it become a pile of dirt? Does it become a tree? Though it would probably require a few rings to make a tree. However, in the case of a ring bond, the ring never returns to the planet. It is forever lost. And what happens as a result of this expansion of the ring, the rings themselves now remember that a memory of the person who made the ring bond is also a part of someone else. This is, in my universe, how my redesign of Amy Rose, Rosie the Rascal, based on the idea of what if Amy had Sonic the Hedgehog's moveset instead of the Pico Pico Hammer and the affiliated moveset. And so, a story of a ring bond is telling us that this bond is extremely important. The whole world roughly functions off of the idea of a ring bond. But there is more to that, which I will say I will cover in the future. To talk about it now would be spoilerish, but it is something to keep in mind, and that will be addressed later on in the future as well. And so as we get to the final line, can you say, I love you? Again, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog AU, but specifically it's focused on the Sonic and Amy ship, the idea of Son Amy. And the idea of Son Amy, Sonic never says it. To know that Sonic and Amy are a couple, you literally have to take that Amy inherited Madonna's role and several of her features. And Madonna's role is literally Sonic's girlfriend. And you have to know and be aware of concept art to see that even with Madonna confirmed as Sonic's girlfriend, that Sonic does not show a good reaction to public displays of affection. He is very negative towards public displays of affection. And that's an interesting thing because it means the average person who is used to couples showing public displays of affection as a very normal thing would be very confused by the idea that Amy is Sonic's love interest and he doesn't show it. It makes it look like otherwise. And it takes a lot of understanding of Sonic's character to see what he could even like in Amy. And there's a lot to study with Amy's character, and it's all stuff I hope to explore with the AU. And so the question, can you say, I love you, is literally directed at Sonic, since for the focus of the AU, I will primarily follow Rosie once she's into the story. That's not to say she will get sole ownership. I have an OC who will get a lot of screen lead time, and Sonic himself will have the occasional scene. Though for the most part, Sonic himself will probably be more akin to how Mickey was in Kingdom Hearts, which is he's around and he's doing things, but you won't see a lot of him early on. Now, I never played Kingdom Hearts, so I can't say how involved Mickey gets later on, but I know early on he's very uninvolved. Sonic will be more in and out comparatively, with the focus primarily being from Rosie's point of view or the yet-to-be-introduced OC's point of view. And the reason for that is because narratively, Sonic as a character with a static arc and as a static character, telling the story from his point of view, it can get messy because it starts to show the flaws with his character structure and a narrative. Technically, I can have the same problem using Rosie as a lead, because like Sonic, Amy is a character with a static arc and is a static character. She has potential to grow, as the Sonic Adventure game showed, just like Tails, who is also technically a character with a static arc and is generally a static character, but can be told otherwise. But for the Sonic the Hedgehog road trip structure, which the franchise has always followed, which is Sonic arrives in a new location, interacts with location and the character that the story is mainly about, some of Sonic's friends who make sense to show up, typically the static characters like himself, Eggman, Tails, and Amy, occasionally Metal Sonic, show up, get involved. These different characters bounce off of the new character, how Sonic affects all of them, affects and influences this character. Sonic's influence on the character's arc reaches its head, the Sonic part of the character's arc is resolved, Sonic moves on to the next adventure, and we never see the character again. Admittedly, the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise does not follow that structure particularly well, because more often than not, the one-off characters are so popular that even before their game launches, plans are being made to bring them back. I would say the exception to this is actually Silver. Silver is the one case where Sega expected the popularity that Knuckles, Shadow, and Blaze enjoyed, and actually planned for it, only for all those plans to get dropped because Silver didn't actually get that popularity. However, they already designed Silver to be a recurring character, despite having a scenario which breaks believability of recurability. Go figure. I will try to address this in my AU when I do introduce Silver later on. As I said, if I can reasonably prove that it is owned by Sega Sammy Holdings and or its affiliates, then there is grounds for it to show up in my AU. So if you're a fan of Sonic the Comic, unfortunately you won't see any of the characters from there show up here, because Sega does not, it cannot be fully proven that Sega has ownership of that stuff. If you want to understand why, look at the Techno the Canary scenario and you'll understand that there is not full ownership. That's one of the reasons that why versions of the Freedom Fighters can and will show up in my AU later on. They will not be the versions that most of you are going to be familiar with. And that's perfectly fine, because again, it's my AU, but I do hope to do good representation of the characters that are enjoyable to fans of them. And as always, once I get the Discord server up, I will be glad to invite everyone along to help me shape the characters to where they are as truthful as they can be, but also fit my AU. So that way, everyone's as close to happy as they can be. Now, with all that said, it's time to get into the story proper for the proofing. So welcome to Sonic Ringbond, episode of After Fall 1. And so, lots of little details here which are just all sorts of things. So, one of the things I've done in the past is I've always written every scene as an act in its own. I'm going to try to continue to do that at this point. No guarantees it will work out necessarily as well as I would like, but I'm going to try to do that. And so you get this little title block here, which, yes, on stream, you'll see I got the cogwheel turning. Which is just, cool little touch. I just enjoy having it lit up like that. Makes me happy when I write. And we'll explain what this broken ring is a little later in this scene. But before the zone begins, I give an introductory statement, little phrase, a bit of storytelling, give an idea of the setting. And so that's going to be the point of this opening paragraph, talking about how different the world is. Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that about Sonic the Comic 261. That's actually pretty awesome that they got a nice little celebratory issue like that. It's kind of a shame for Archie fans that they'll probably never see anything like that. It really makes me again want to I'm not going to say do justice to the Freedom Fighters, because the very idea of the Freedom Fighters requires a scenario that's untrue to the games, which is what my stuff is rooted in. Because the Freedom Fighters requires Eggman conquered the world. And the general idea of Eggman in the games is he's trying to conquer the world. And Sonic just happens to stop whatever plot he stumbled upon. And so the very idea of a group that fights back against Eggman's rule doesn't work when Eggman doesn't rule. So being able to do enjoyable versions of them, I think would be a nice gift to Archie fans. And I don't necessarily dislike the Freedom Fighters. A lot of people may think I do as a Son Amy fan and a strong preference for the Japanese game canon, at least through Unleashed, because really Unleashed is kind of the last time it feels like there's any cohesion you can pull back to. But, for example, usually my big problem with the Freedom Fighters is that their roles don't fit the story of Sonic. For example, Sally Acorn's role is not Princess of the Kingdom of Acorn like a lot of people think it is. Her role is kind of like Amy. She's got two roles. Well, technically they both have more roles than that, but she has two easy-to-see roles. Amy's two easy-to-see roles is love interest and comic relief. Sally's two easy-to-see roles is love interest and the person who takes Sonic's ideas and makes reasonable plans out of them. And those two roles are very hard for Sally to have in a game-influenced setting, because again, if you're going Japanese game canon as your basis like I do, then Sonic's love interest is Amy. If you're going that way again, Sonic doesn't come up with ideas that need to have plans made around them. He's a spontaneous adventurer who's as free as the wind. There's nothing for Sally to make a plan out of. A properly Japanese game canon accurate Sonic is going to have no interactions with Sally that gives her any roles. And that's a major problem for a character to have no roles which fit. And it's going to be the thing which will probably make Sally the most difficult character for me to use personally. But I have plans to address my shortcomings, mostly relying on other people. Perhaps a bit lazy, but that's the way I'll be going about it. Now, conversely, I actually find out of the original Freedom Fighters of Sally, Bunny, Antoine, and Rotor, I actually find Bunny and Rotor will be the easiest for me to use. Bunny, though, requires some major tweaking in her backstory, and just pretty much backstory overhaul to fit my AU. But the idea that she is still a victim of Eggman's actions, and if one goes with Japanese game canon Eggman, who doesn't even think about the consequences of his actions or considers that his actions could have negative effects on others. It's one of my personal problems with Ian Flynn Eggman, is Ian Flynn Eggman knows the harm his actions are going to cause others and relishes in it. Relishes it and revels in it. And that's not Eggman to me. There's a lot of Ian Flynn's perspective on Eggman, which doesn't line up with who Eggman was, I would argue, before Sonic Adventure. Come Sonic Adventure, Eggman's entire character didn't just get a physical redesign, he had a complete character rewrite. He's nothing at all like he was before then. It's one of the reasons my AU will be starting at the time period it does, is it puts front and center a scenario to where I can write Eggman as the way I prefer his character. If you're familiar with the Japanese version of the OVA, good place to look for to understand what I think about when I think of Eggman. But, as I said, a bit of a tangent there, a lot of thoughts to have. But yes, thank you for sharing that, Becca from the 80s. Really appreciate it, gave me a lot to talk about there. Back to the scene at hand, though. So, this opening paragraph sets the situation of the Earth sets the nature of the rings, and also introduces the idea that just like you have a god of destruction, a god of the planet, two of them actually, in the case of Dark and Light Gaia, you have a god of dreams, you have a god of space-time, that even the rings themselves, which persist through the domains of all these things, also have their own deity. And that is my primary antagonist. And so that opening paragraph wraps it up. The next section is my way of narrating and setting a scene. I try not to spend too much time lingering on describing things that the user's imagination or the reader's imagination fill in the gaps. And so sometimes these sections will be a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. But in this case, what I would do is I'll tell a quick, short, descriptive sentence. Then I'll tell another one, and another one, and another one. It's just jump, 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 jump. Pardon me, jump, 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 pulling the eye around. I can't think of the director's name right now. Let me look him up real quick, and I can get that information for you. But the visual style of the director, yes, Ikuhara Kunihiko-sensei. People should know him for Revolutionary Gore Utena, though he's also done Salazanmai, Yurikuma Arashi, and the one I know him most for, Mawaru Penguin Drum. And that's where I get the idea of doing the sentence structure that I do. It's actually inspired by how he'll introduce a scene or a shift in focus in a scene with quick focuses on things in the environment which set the scene and tell you what you need to know about it. To me, it's very interesting how he will take the focus off the characters and put it into the environment around them to tell the story. As even though the characters are experiencing it and it's about them, the environment around them can also tell us a great deal of what's going on and why it's happening. Now, these sections will also routinely be what I'm going to call incomplete. I will provide more description later in the scene. Now, sometimes I will put character descriptions into these because it's a quick, snappy way to do it. But other times I will leave the character descriptions as a more regular paragraph because how I describe them is important to telling their character. Like if I was to introduce Metal Sonic would get a section like this because it keeps him artificial, so to say, instead of organic. And so it better fits him than a more organic and flowing paragraph. And so as we finally get past all this exposition and setting and scene building, we finally get to the first spoken line of dialogue. And it is a line of dialogue spoken by my antagonist, the villain of my story, Emperor Benedict Yodoku. Really fun guy. If you're watching the beginning of this, you would have seen the design for him show up. I'm not happy with his hair still, but I have no idea how to fix it. It's something I'll probably end up commissioning someone else to do later in the future to really clean up his design. Probably would commission an artist like Evan Stanley for the IDW comics. Though I don't know how good she necessarily is with Oshima Naoto Sensei's Balance style. If you're aware of Balance Wonderland or Wonder World, I can never remember the title properly. but that is actually the character of human, well, the style of human characters that I use for Benedict's design. His actual physical looks are based off of Howl from Studio Ghibli's take on Howl's Moving Castle, as well as, let's see here, the character Knights from, well, Sega's franchise Knights, and I can never remember the character's name. So let me look it up a sec to get that last character going. Yes, Nagisa Kaworu-song is also a visual inspiration from him from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Though, to be honest, there also may be a tiny bit of Lelouch v. Britannia from Lelouch of the Rebellion. Bit of influence from his design in there as well. And then most importantly, because he's meant to be a... Oh, I've seen her human work, and that's why I specifically mention a style different from her own. Now, she does, and she's got a number of different human styles, so I've seen a few of them, but she does have a very standard one she falls back to. And I feel that the style I use for Benedict is a bit different from that. But the last inspiration for Yodoku's design is actually how I even came up with his name, which is purposely playing around with Japanese phonetic characters and how one would spell the word yolk. Because he's designed to be a recurring villain who can always come back, you can't get rid of him, but his motivation and what makes him a villain is, for the most part, really petty. He just wants to be entertained. He's that simple of a character. Being entertained is the most important thing in the world to him. But the idea to him being so petty that way is it allows him to be a recurring villain, as an immortal deity who you can't get rid of. It's fine that he doesn't grow as a character, because even if he experiences growth, from the viewpoint of short-lived human beings and other mortals, it's something which you would probably need a few thousands of years to even notice a difference in how he's acting. And so, because he's structured this way, I wanted to have one bit of egg theming in him. It's actually also why his name is Benedict, specifically referencing the American dish, Eggs Benedict, which is toast with poached eggs and hollandaise sauce on top of it. And so again, it's why he wears white and has blonde hair. It's so if he's defeated in a fight and he's down kneeling on the ground with his cape wrapped around him, he'll look like a fried egg sunny side up. The whole idea of egg theming is, again, Eggman's the main villain, and if you're going to have a long-term recurring villain, you should still have egg theming going, so you still always think of Eggman as the big main bad. At least that's my thoughts on it. Maybe it's a bit too into it, but that's the way I think of things. Now, normally if I had more time, I'd be talking a bit less, actually, because I would be more thoroughly reading my paragraphs and making sure what mistakes in this sort that I have in them, so that way I can proof more. And so what will happen is I will do a second proofing later, followed by a third proofing when I prep it for publishing. And so what ends up happening in those cases is that I would highlight a sentence, or a paragraph like this one, and I'd read through it, and kind of give a rough idea of what's going on in it. In this case, it's literally just describing him, but as his body language is described, it's why I didn't go with the snappy, quick lines to describe him. So, it is a good thing that I went back and read it, because I didn't have a complete sentence there. And you'll notice that I use a lot of things in this description, describing him as beautiful, intoxicating, appealing. A lot of the idea behind that is me personally. I get people get the appeal of evil being dark, filthy, even describable as ugly, because people affiliate that with destructive evil. However, Yodoku represents indulgent evil, and indulgent evil is beautiful, appealing, desirable. It's terrifying at the fact that it looks like everything you want. And I personally have a preference for that versus destructive evil. Destructive evil has its point, don't get me wrong, and it's very useful. Eggman is a destructive evil in a showman's skin. But Yodoku is kind of a mix of a destructive evil, but also being beautiful. Most people want to have fun, and that desire for fun is twisted in his case to the point of literally being threatening to the entire world. And so to me, it is essential that he's always beautiful. Anything around him has to be beautiful. It has to show that beauty can be just as evil as ugly. And so as I scroll down past that initial description, we get into more of his conversation. You're going to see the system, the corrections get mad at me for this one. Want is a weird word. A lot of people don't use it. It's a bit archaic. If I bring up the synonyms, you'll see some ideas of what it does here. I don't know if that shows in the stream or not. I'll have to check it later. But you'll see that it uses inclined, used, accustomed, liable, tendency. You know, it's kind of a way to say, this is the way you typically do things. So it's a little archaic, but it covers what I want it to do. And whoever this guest is that Yodoku's speaking with, and if you've been reading along, you'll notice that indeed he does have a guest. Is if I don't quite introduce them yet, because again, I said a bit of the things. One of the weird things about Sonic's world is a lot of people are going to say, well, it's the Anthro world, not the human world, because of Izuka and his two-world statement, which is itself based on, I'm going to say, dialogue from Nakayuji's song. And even Sonic X shows the idea of an Anthro world and a human world interacting as two separate planets, except for one small detail. As Nakayuji-san asked about the Sonic movie, why is Sonic an alien? Sonic is from Christmas Island, but he's from the Sonic Universe version of Earth's Christmas Island. And one of the weird things about the world, rather inconsistently, is a lot of times you'll see that Sonic's world, well, Sonic's version of Earth, has two moons. It also has an extra planet orbiting it, rather uniquely through time, space, and dimensions, in Little Planet. And so you'll see in this description that I take the time to define that there's two moons, and one of them's broken. I also described that the Earth is pretty much destroyed right now. And if you're familiar with the games, then you'll know that the calamity which took out half of one of the two moons is going to be from Sonic Adventure 2 when Eggman fires the Eclipse Cannon. And so now we already know that at this point in the story, Sonic Adventure 2 is canon. It's going to get really confusing in the future until I finally get to Shadow's first story in the AU. And that's going to be interesting to write. Honestly, if I knew the Japanese language, I would reach out to Mai Kawashiro-san on Twitter and ask him for his advice in writing the character through the scenarios that I'll be writing him for. Realistically, I still may reach out to him and just use the translation service DeepL, because it actually happens to cover Japanese. But again, I'll also bring in, if I can, fans who I trust as experts in the character and have viewpoints similar to mine, which are very much rooted into characters' actions into games. At least before Takashi Iisuka was put in charge of Sega, and Shadow had this weird character shift, which doesn't really line up with who he was before it. Now, I'm not going to blame Iisuka on that, because Iisuka can write Shadow the same way Mayakawa Shiro-san does. And the fact that he can, but Shadow isn't like that at all once he was the head of Sonic Team, is really bizarre to me. Now then, as we get past just another quick thing building the setting, the following paragraph finally introduces the idea that he has a guest. And it may be a little odd that I don't describe the guest, don't introduce the guest, don't address the guest, never show the guest his actions. The reason for that is I do not want the identity of the guest to be known at this point of the story, because revealing the identity of the guest is going to be a huge shift in how things in the story work later on. When the characters know who it is, and when the audience knows, just in general, once the audience knows, it's going to affect perception of various characters in the story later on. And I want that perception change to come later when it makes narrative sense. For now, I need characters to be looked at in a different light. And so it's not so much that it's a twist that will come later, though it could be seen as a twist. It's more so that I just want things perceived differently than how they will be later. It's hard to describe, probably shouldn't go into as much detail as I am, but it is the reason trying to control reader perception of why the guest is not introduced at this point. Though, you'll also see in Yodaku's dialogue, though he hasn't spoken his own name yet, until a bit later in the paragraph, you'll notice that he blames the other person for the world having ended for their, I guess we can call it vain belief in saving it from him. He perceives it as his because the world is made of rings, and as the god of rings, it's naturally his. And you'll see how twisted his perception of the world is in how he talks about the various characters, well, how he talks about mortal life. Though I do want to change something here, because I don't want him to say survivors. That's being kinder to mortals than he would be. His typical character is going to describe them as dirt dwellers. You will see when eventually in the story he talks to Sonic, he refers to Sonic as dirt dweller with a pair of capital D's. And so that's just one of those little things to keep in mind. In his character, he very much looks down on mortals. And this is going to be one of the few, with this particular scenes, rare instances of Yodaku not showing his being entertained by things. He's awake, and people don't know who he is. That bothers him. He's got a big ego. Again, little surprise being what he is. And then as I shift from this moment of ugly anger, we will once again bring up the idea of him being beautiful. Laughter's a good thing. Everyone wants to laugh. But then as we follow it up, I show that what he's laughing about is not necessarily a good thing. If I write him as best as I possibly can, he should be unsettling, disturbing, and make your skin crawl. I'm not that good of a writer yet, but I hope to get there as I continue to write and tell my AU story. And you'll see him continue to blame the person defying him, his guest, for the world ending. And so it's giving an idea that the rings make up the world, he's the god of rings, he's beautiful, these are all things you should want. And that even defying him has destroyed the world. So how is this a good thing to defy him? And again, as I said, that's part of the idea behind him being a beautiful character, is it's supposed to make him look appealing and difficult to see what makes him so evil until you see those moments which just are unsettling. Which again is kind of the case with Eggman. Eggman is a vainglorious showman who's always bragging about himself. And when you look at Eggman just being Eggman, you're scarce to think of him as a danger, a threat. So when you take a step back from looking at Eggman and seeing what he's accomplishing, the realization that this vainglorious goofball of a showman, total manchild, is the greatest threat the world has ever faced, and then you realize he's totally in control. And it creates that moment of discomfort. And that's what I would like to be able to capture with Yodoku, is to create that discomfort. It's a tricky thing to do, though, because he is unlike a traditional Japanese game canon Eggman, who's evil because he doesn't care. Yodoku is evil because people's reactions to it entertains him. And so he is significantly more openly evil than Eggman. And so capturing that balance to be able to have those moments of discomfort, it will be a bit harder because it may just be easier to outright hate him for how twisted and evil he is. And in the fact that he's beautiful, appealing, intoxicating, he's almost in that regard, I guess, like the evil of alcohol. If you look at him from a distance, you're okay. But once you get involved, it can start to get a little troublesome. But once you're too involved, it can be fatal. And not just to yourself, but to anyone else who gets involved. And that is, in its own way, frightening. Again, hopefully it's something that I'll be able to really capture over the course of telling the AU story. Ideally, while I can't say how long I'll be at it, I would just like to tell this story for as many years as I can. Just let it to continue to grow, mature, and develop. And I'm structuring it in a way now, unlike in the past, to where even if Sega makes big changes in the video games, that the AU will always be able to function and adapt and even take from the games. About the only exception which could really make the AU not be able to work with the games is literally if Sega killed Amy. Sega killing Amy would literally make it impossible for the AU to function. No Amy means no Rosie, means no AU. So, suffice to say, as long as Sega doesn't kill Amy off, the AU can function. Even if they were to turn around and give Sonic a completely different love interest, have him get married and have kids, the AU could still function. Maybe horribly disrespectful to anybody who would follow such a storyline, since the AU is a Son-Amy-centric AU. But, again, outside of kind of those two very unlikely scenarios, the AU should function. And so, this paragraph I just had highlighted is to show a bit of a shift. It's more so just kind of a transition. And that's a little grammatically weird. So I want to go ahead and fix that real quick. Again, this is the proofing section of the stream, so need to fix stuff like that. And again, though, it's a transition to introduce one of the big things of the AU, which is, of course, the Ring of Memories, which is what you're going to see pretty much in all of my series imagery is this ring. I have a more complete version of it, but we're not going to worry about that. Not at this time, at least. I don't believe any of Sonic's friends are dead in Sonic Frontiers. I'll be perfectly honest with that. But I'm still certain there's stuff that I'll be able to learn from it. And eventually, the thing about AUs is they become their own thing regardless. It is, after all, what's helping with the IDW comics becoming its own thing. If the IDW comics have a problem, it's that its original characters are kind of taking over the story. You have three characters who have stories going right now, though two of them are a bit more intricately linked than others, and that you have Bill's story, which should be primarily concluded by issue 50, and then you have Whisper's story, which is primarily being dug into by Tangle. And so, as you notice, Bill's story is also influencing Surge and Kit's story because of Starline's story. But you start to notice that because of the static nature and the static status quo of the game characters, that the story has shifted away from them. And so, it's one of the more interesting problems with the Sonic setup, because Sonic really does work better with one-off story arcs rather than as an ongoing serial. You could have a serial arc, but once the arc is over, the next arc cannot be a continuation after it. It just has to be a new story. At least to keep Sega's status quo in place. Otherwise, it just ends up hurting the overall experience. And so, back on the story, from this paragraph to this paragraph, you'll notice that, and I specifically say that this massive ring lay in the sky, because I want to imply it's on its side, because rings are typically vertical, which I haven't really described yet. I'll probably end up covering that in a later scene. But at this point of the story, it's fine to describe it as laying. And you'll notice it's tremendous. I shouldn't just say miles across. I should describe it more accurately as hundreds of miles across. The idea is that this thing is just ridiculously massive. But conversely, its position is indeterminable. That will be easier to understand later when I wrap up the prologue. And there will be several chapters in the prologue. This is literally just the first chapter. And pretty much the prologue chapters in general are episode of Afterfall. And the idea to them is to prepare the setting of the story. And there's a bit to cover there. It's probably going to be a lot more plot advancement at this part than the first episode that comes after. It's also, this particular paragraph, getting back to it, a transition from a transition. So it's kind of a pair of transitions, so I can start shifting to putting the focus on this big ring and its role in the story. And so, with Yodoku talking again, I'm now positioning him to introduce the Ring of Memories and what it does. And right off the bat, I'm pretty much telling you with this thing's introduction in this first chapter that the Ring of Memories existing literally allows the rewriting of the world at any point. Which is a lot of the idea behind it, is to constantly allow my world to change and shift and be turned on its head. Partly, the biggest idea behind that is to keep Sonic's world from feeling too small. Take the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, for example. For as much as they try to make this big fancy road trip out of the movie, which doesn't even really happen aside from stopping at the bar, the problem is there's no sense of distance between Green Hills in Montana and San Francisco in California. It's only about 1,200 miles between the two. If Sonic was like his game equivalent self and had a love for adventure, travel, and ancient legends, he would not have needed Tom to get there. He simply would have opened up an atlas, read the map, saw how he needed to get there, and get over there in about an hour. Collected his rings, and the whole ability for Eggman to even catch up with him would have never happened. A lot of that plot for that movie to work relies on a very different Sonic from Japanese game canon Sonic. And it also forces the world to be larger than it is by this major shift in personality. And so, it's kind of the problem when you're trying to tell a road trip story, which is what Sonic's story is. It's a perpetual road trip. but your character's so fast they can run everywhere in a matter of hours. I mean, if one considers, say, the Pokemon anime, despite the fact that he's still 10, Satoshi, or Ash as he's known in the States, has been to every region, but it takes him forever to get there. These are long walks, long trips. They're not quick. They take up a lot of time, and he spends days, weeks, months in these regions getting involved with the people, their stories, having several adventures, and continuing to grow as a Pokemon trainer. But if he could travel at the speed of sound like Sonic could, there would be no time to get invested. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of characters in the Sonic franchise are very similar to Sonic. A lot of them are Sonic clones to a degree. Shadow's probably the most blatant, though a lot of people miss it, but Amy's actually also very much a Sonic clone. She is probably the character who is closest to Sonic as a clone than any other. I don't know if it was intentional in her case, like, say, Shadow was intentional, but the reason they have to have something that Sonic can invest in, that similarity to him, is because that investment is what allows the story to expand. There are few exceptions. Probably the most unique exception is easily Chip from Sonic Unleashed. Sonic literally takes responsibility for his amnesia. And because he takes responsibility for his amnesia, he just drags him along with him while he goes on his adventure to save the world, hoping that along the way, something will happen that will jog Chip's memory. Which is eventually what happens. But Sonic has no investment in Chip, per se the situation or the scenario or otherwise. It's just literally he feels responsible. So the fact that they're able to form a friendship also shows one of the interesting things about Sonic as a character, is that to form a friendship with Sonic, you gotta be able to keep up. It's one of the big things which hinders Amy and any potential recognition of her as Sonic's girlfriend, is that she can't keep up. Whereas Tails, his best friend and sidekick, can keep up. Knuckles can keep up. Shadow can keep up. Blaze can keep up. Silver can keep up. And because all these characters can keep up, it creates kind of a weird scenario, because part of the thing about Sonic is he's an aloof character, and so there needs to be a certain distance between him and everyone else anyways. And so the more characters that can keep up, the less his aloof behavior becomes acceptable. But conversely, some characters can't work if they don't keep up with him. Now, a character who can't keep up with him, but made sense what Sonic became invested in, was Elise. Much as a lot of people don't like Elise, and if you're like me and needed to have the romance between Sonic and Elise pointed out as more than one-sided crush, what makes Elise interesting as a point of investment for Sonic is all about being free. Free to do what he wants, free to go where he wants, free to indulge in life as he sees fit. Elise, on the other hand, she is such a trapped character, she's not even free to express her own emotions. And to Sonic, this is tyranny. And if there's one thing that Sonic legitimately hates, it's oppression. And so that Elise is oppressed by her situation, Sonic grows invested in her to save her from the oppression. He can't save her from her responsibility, but he can save her from the oppression that comes from her situation. And it's a really interesting story in that case, and a lot of fun to follow. At least in my opinion it is. Again, as I said, Elise isn't really a liked character, but if you can look at what Sonic is doing and have a good enough understanding of Sonic's character, you see him trying to save an oppressed child from what's oppressing them. He's trying to give them a life worth living, smiling and enjoying. And it's a very interesting challenge for Sonic, especially since over the entire course of the game, you have this horrible disaster hanging over the head of Elise and literally Iblis ending the world. If anything, Sonic 06 is a badly put in order story. There are certain events, in my opinion, that would make a lot more sense if the story followed Silver learning that Sonic's responsible for Iblis being freed, following Shadow when he's in the past to show Iblis being sealed. Though really you can discover that in Silver's story. But to show Iblis being sealed in Elise, and then to show Sonic opening up Elise's emotions so she can be free of her oppression. It makes it a lot more interesting, and the sense of danger and tension from Sonic not doing what's right and wrong, but what he believes is right, and the fact that his actions are very well dooming the world. Because he's doing what he believes in. And it's one of the reasons I will argue with people that Sonic is not a hero. Not by his own decree. He is perceived as a hero because his actions are heroic. But his heroic actions are driven both by his kindness and his own selfishness. It makes Sonic a spectacularly interesting character. There's so much depth to him. But surface level, it's very hard to see. And it doesn't help that from Sonic Colors on, really Sonic Freeriders on, it's been Sonic the stand-up comic on a road trip. And it's frustrating, to be honest. And so, personally speaking, I really am hoping Sonic Frontiers will kind of course correct. Forces had the chance, but Forces took a bunch of ideas that could have been really cool, put them in a blender, and just made a mess out of it. It was not put together very well. Why will forever be a mystery, but it is what it is. Now, my long tangent over, back to my story, and the idea of rewriting the world as it sees fits. All of that long tangent stemmed from the idea that Sonic's world is too small in a traditional road trip storytelling structure. And so being able to constantly change the world, shift it around, shuffle it through dimensions, and constantly rebuild it is a necessity to keep the world large and ever expansive for Sonic to continue to be an adventurer, encountering new discoveries. And so, with the description of the Ring of Memories out of the way, I can get back into the story here. And again, you're going to see a bit of Yodoku's bizarre perception of the world at this thing. This thing can rewrite the world as he sees fit. It can completely alter people's memories to whatever he wants them to be. And you'll see straight from the get-go that the Himmel is a toy, a way to torment people, to mess with their heads and throw their worlds completely into chaos, just so he can be amused. It's again, that moment of discomfort I'm aiming for, to show he's not quite pleasing, despite the fact that he's otherwise very pleasing. And as we get past that moment again of how evil he is, you're going to see him talk about his control over it was stolen. And that is where we're going to be getting into the main bulk of the story now, is the idea of chasing this thief. Now, I'm not going to keep the identity of the thief hidden for long. Maybe. It's going to depend. There's a lot of different things that I can do. I may purposely keep it hidden, because I was just thinking I can very well do a couple of other things, so we'll see how it goes. It's the fun thing about the way I write. I don't really plan, and there's a strange reason for it on my part, and that is, if I know a story too well, I can't write it, because I already know it and I get bored. And so for me, it's a lot better to tell the story and just let it happen as I tell it. It's also a great way to learn the characters and go, oh, if I think about it, they would do this in this scenario created, and that totally changes everything I was planning. And so it's always a lot of fun that way. This scene is very structured, because I actually had an idea of what I was doing, and again, I was mostly world building right now, which is what, again, these prologue chapters are going to be. They're going to be a lot more controlled than what's going to come after. And now you see Yodoku getting enthusiastic, he's getting excited, because suddenly he realizes that this could very well be the plan of his guest, to find the thief and use the Ring of Memories to rebuild the world. And so, that's where we're going to be going as the scene now moves forward. And so a lot of what's going to be happening now is Yodoku's excited. The game has begun. And I take a moment here as he's preparing the game to show that, yes, he can create rings out of nothing. It's what he does. He is kind of a terrifying being. And the reason for only one pawn on the board, I would hope, is obvious in the fact that literally the only pawn either side knows they have is going to be the thief. And so now we got a really weird game of chess going on, and that you don't eliminate pawns, you steal them and use them as your own. And so part of the idea behind this is, well, it's just kind of a thematic thing, really, and kind of plays into how Yodoku uses people, is one of the things it covers is, consider when Sonic Forces was being revealed, a lot of people wanted to know, why is Chaos and Shadow helping Eggman? It didn't make a lot of sense to people. It turns out at the end it wasn't them, just fancy illusions. But the idea of people switching sides based off what's going on in the narrative is something I want to establish now. Sometimes a character who was helped could be an ally, and other times they could be an enemy. Sometimes helping someone who needed help could end up being beneficial for the enemy, and vice versa. I'm showing right here that the world is diverse and flexible, and that you shouldn't necessarily trust what you see. And so as he just delights in the idea of the game as we wrap up, I go ahead and end the act. And World Palace Zone is one we'll get to at another point, but that will require getting far enough along into the story to actually reveal Yodoku's seal, which will be a tremendous shift in storytelling. And as I end the scene, I just take a moment to tell us where we'll be going next. And with that, we finally reach the end of the scene. Episode of After Fall 01, end. A lot, as I said, to cover with that scene. Next scene should be fairly interesting. Don't quite know how that one's going to go yet, but that will be tomorrow morning. Right now, it's time for the basic proof check. Gotta give it a moment to kick itself. No, it looks like it's actually working for a change. Using Microsoft Word, all sorts of bugs and glitches, which makes the program do anything but work well. So, just 2 mistakes at once taken care of. And that's into copyright information. Go figure. And there we go. So, normally I would be glad to have a question and answer session now, but at this point, I'm going to need to go ahead and wrap up the stream, because I've gone over the time frame I wanted to. Normally these streams would go for about 3 hours, so we're about half an hour over. There was a lot of talking during the stream, during the writing part of the stream, so if you're only watching this via recording, you unfortunately missed out on it. Not normally that much talking in those sections, but if you'd like to see them, please be sure to stop by the streams live. Again, tomorrow's stream will be again at 9 o'clock a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And so hopefully tomorrow things will go a bit smoother and I'll have time to take questions. If you'd like to ask questions, as always, feel free to stop by the stream and join in on the chat. I'm always glad to talk and get distracted, as you saw from today. But for now, we'll be wrapping up. Thank you very much, everyone. I will see you all next time.